a game that we played, and it had this key line that was given, and the line that was given to each one of us was, follow the leader. Remember that game? Comes in many forms, but essentially the request is that you would follow the leader. Leaders of North New Zealand Conference, imagine a church where people walk into churches right around our conference every single Sabbath and they feel welcome. They feel like after the whole week they are coming home. Imagine a church where people, when they sit in church, can relax. They can sit and demask. They can drop the mask of the week or whatever it is that they usually and sometimes put on when they go to church. Imagine that kind of a church. Imagine a church where people who are hurt, people who have hang-ups, people who have discouragement and pain. Imagine a church where people like that can come and be themselves and know that they are cared for, that they are loved, and that they are accepted. Imagine that church. Imagine that church. I would like to propose this morning that that church begins with you and me. Leaders who are Spirit-led. So let me take you this morning to the 4 words that we've been focusing on. Beholding the glory of God, worshiping God. Believing in His Son, Jesus Christ, and as our faith strengthens and grows, belonging to the community of faith, brothers and sisters, family, and becoming more and more like His Son, Jesus Christ. The Spirit of God, who raised Jesus from the dead, lives in you. And just as God raised Christ Jesus from the dead, He will give life to your mortal bodies by this same Spirit living in you. Therefore, dear brothers and sisters, and I underlined brothers and sisters because it's talking about this family. Imagine the church truly being the place where when you say brother, you actually believe that. When you say sister, you actually mean that. Therefore, dear brothers and sisters, you have no obligation to do what your sinful nature urges you to do, for if you live by its dictates, you will die. But if through the power of the Spirit you put to death the deeds of your sinful nature, you will live. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God. Spirit-led leaders. God calls you and brings you here every year. Some of you for a few years now, some the very first time, and God will call you back to this place again, to Tui Ridge, the spiritual home of the North New Zealand Conference, to remind us that we are Spirit-led. And when we are Spirit-led, then we are leaders. And when we're not, we are just pretending. We're just on our own trip. So, you have not received the Spirit that makes you fearful slaves. Amen. Did you see that? So you have not received the Spirit that makes you fearful slaves. Amen. You have not received a spirit that makes you fearful, and you're not a slave. Amen? Instead, you receive God's Spirit when He adopted you as His own children. Now we call Him Abba Father. I love this church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. But more than the church, more than the denomination, more than its organizational structure, more than its entities, its hospitals, its schools, its land, its churches, its people, and the mission that we have. And the way that we've interpreted it here, as God has led us and called us, is that we would seek to be healthy Adventist churches. Healthy Adventist churches. In 2001, right here at Tui Ridge Park, 2001, Pastor Jerry Matthews, the president of the North New Zealand Conference back then, came to Tui Ridge with the executive committee. They spent the whole weekend here and prayed for the future of this conference. And when they came out of that weekend, they came out with a vision for our conference, a spirit-filled body of believers sharing Jesus with their communities. And that vision has carried us many years. I don't know who was here, who was part of that Ronald Davidson was part of that executive committee. I'm taking you on this short historical tour because I want to outline for you, I want to impress upon you that God is leading in this conference. It's not about the conference, it's not about the leadership, it's not about the pastors, and I thank God for the pastors that are here this weekend. It's not about you as church leaders, it's about God's Spirit leading us. 2005, it was very clear to us this idea of health. The Adventist Church has this health message, amazing legacy of health that has been passed on to us as a church. We realized if the church can be healthy, not only physically, but in every other way the church could be healthy, then the church would grow. And it wouldn't just grow in numbers, it would grow in their relationships. It would grow in how they cared for each other and how they loved each other. It would grow and flourish in the way that they worshipped, in the way that they loved the community, in the way they grew deeper in the Word and in prayer. Pastor Jerry Matthews asked Pastor Brendan Pratt and myself to start an institute called the Institute of Church Leadership Development back in 2005. And it was the beginnings of focusing on the importance of leadership in the church. Leaders, people like you. And then we realized if every year we can focus on a key purpose of church, not that we only do it on that year, but if that year we could bring it front of page and pray about it and talk about it and return to the Lord and be renewed in this area, why don't we do that? So for the next 5 years, a year of worship, a year of fellowship, a year of discipleship. 2008, we were about to say that the year of 2009 would be a year of ministry. But it became very clear to us as we moved around the conference and listened to our church members that there was a deep need for a focus on families. And as we see the falling apart of families in New Zealand, we realized that we needed to focus on families. So that's what we did in 2009. 2010 was a focus on evangelism. Last year was a focus on worship, This year, the focus has been discipleship. And here at Spirit-Led 2012, we have been focusing on fellowship, getting ready for next year. All those workshops that we've been a part of, Ministry of Pastor Janosch this weekend, and then 2014, evangelism, and then 15 again, families. I'd like us to share a little bit about this morning and talk to some of our leaders who have been involved in our workshops and others who have been a part of our discussion, our conversation over the past few years and how we go forward. And so I'd like to ask them to come forward, and before they do, just remind you of where we are as a conference right now. Over the years, we continually prayed, Lord, what do we do? Where do we go? How do we move forward? Some of you attended the town hall meetings where Pastor Ben Timothy and I visited the conference, and we discussed, where is North New Zealand going next? We discussed this at the session with the executive committee, with our pastors, and we were clear that number one was to build godly local church leaders. That's what Spirit-Led is about, and other activities and programs and initiatives that we have. Number two is to grow and plant healthy Adventist churches. We've been on that journey, and you'll hear a little bit more about that today. Number three, serve communities with Christ-like love. I want you to notice something here before I call up about our first person. Have you seen the images? You see how all these images have been used over the years. You notice also the colors. And you heard Pastor Bob Larson last night explaining to Pastor Janosch. First there was the koru. Now we're in the time of the hook. First color was green. Next color was orange. We're in the period of orange right now. See your orange lanyards and your green name tags. So we're about to move into the next phase. And we only just started talking about this last week in our staff meeting. So as God leads us forward into the next phase, 2014, 15, 16. So what's the next image? What's the next color? So if you have any suggestions, you have any impressions upon your mind as to where God leads us next and the story of God's church in New Zealand, I'd love to hear from you. Karen Newson, could you come forward, please, Karen? And I'll give her this microphone here. Some of you will have been at Karen's workshops. Could you just put your hand up and thank you. And can we put our hands together and thanks to Karen? Firstly, Karen, what is your role in ministry currently?
So I work for Papatoetoe SDA Community Church, and I'm involved in both our areas of community and life groups.
Now, you have been teaching about that this weekend. Could you share that with us in a nutshell, the condensed version, so that the rest of us who missed out can pick up, but also be blessed?
I guess the reality is, and I've heard it said by a number of you, you've alluded to it this morning, Eddie, Brendan talked about it in his workshop, that we live in a broken world. We come from broken families, and we are all broken to some degree or another. And that is the communities that we're living in. And people so much more need from us that to know that we care about them than to know what we know. That comes once they know that we care about them. And so I think it's so important to connect people into a group of people that know them for who they really are, that know them for the real them, for all of the things that they struggle with, all of the things that they love, but still choose to hang with them. It's one of our deepest needs, is to have this group of people that love and accept us for who we are, and yet aren't prepared to leave us that way, support us and hold us accountable to the journey that God asks us to continue to walk with him.
Thank you. As I'm listening to Karen, I again want to use that statement that I started off with. Imagine a church like that. That you come and you know that you're accepted to that level. That you actually are not only attending church together, but you are doing life together. Yeah, thank you so much, Karen, and God bless you. I'd like to call Anne to come forward, please. Anne Larson. Anne Larson is our Women's Ministries Director, and she also has a special role where she is the Partner in Ministries Coordinator. So she ministers to all the pastors' spouses in our conference. So Anne, please share with us what you'd like us to know this morning. And I'll ask you to take that mic there, please.
Thank you, Eddie. I'm going to talk to you about 3 things today, if I may.
Sure.
And if you'll just put it up on the screen, the first page. Okay, that's fine. There's the 3 things: Pim, Wim, and Gigi. Pim, partners in ministry. I've been given the role of keeping in touch with all the pastoral spouses, and we can't call them pastors' wives because we have 3 women, as Karen's just stated. Her husband is one of our partners in ministries. So we have 3 men who are part of our partners in ministries team. I must say, Pim the privilege is mine. Because as I've been to see a lot of these ladies, and I haven't seen all of you yet, some of you that are here, I'm totally in awe of these ladies. You in your corner see generally about 1 or maybe 2 pastors' spouses, but I get to see all of them. And I just ask that you will love the one that's in your corner, and more than that, to pray for her. Pray for her. She is human, but she's wonderful. The other area I'm going to talk about is WIM. Actually, it's WM, Women's Ministries. But at the moment, I can't get my head past the fact that it ought to be Women in Ministry. And at this stage, what I'll just focus on for Women's Ministries is there's a flyer on the other side there. You see the picture of this lady here, very snowy white hair. She's probably not, well, she doesn't actually look that old. This is Kristen Thompson. She's the speaker that we have planned for our Women's Ministries, our Women's Retreat here in this very hall in November 9 to 11. And when I spoke for an hour or so with Kristen about her planned messages, and you see the theme? Yeah, like a tree, Jeremiah. I was just in awe of what she had just sort of spilt out to me in that hour on what she planned for her messages. And my focus, I just can't seem to get past the focus of encouraging all of our women into a deeper walk in the Word. And that's what we're doing that weekend. Okay. Gigi. I'll show you. That's it. That is the latest issue of Gigi magazine. And we say it in the French style because it sounds classy. Are there any girls who are here today who are between the ages of 13 and 19? Put your hand up if you are here. None, but, oh, good, Diane's here. Diane, anybody else? No. Diane, I'm going to give you one of these. Gigi is a magazine that has been put out, and that's the latest copy. Isn't she beautiful? She's a part Solomon Island girl. Gigi is a project, a mission project, put out by 5 sisters in Brisbane who all look like peas in a pod. They're all the same sort of looking face, these sisters, but they have a ministry to teenage girls. And girls, if you've got any in your home, I've heard of one of the teenage girls in our church. Her mother says she keeps me wanting to ask me to buy her these girly magazines. And so I gave her this to have a look at, and she loved it. And I said, they have an online subscription. In the book, they have a website. You can look at Gigi, and you'll find it. You can subscribe online. It is expensive in New Zealand dollars because they must post it, and I think they do it airmail because I got it pretty quick, my subscription. But it's a magazine which, when you ever tried to tell your daughter to clean her room up, hello, she wouldn't. But this magazine, one of the back copies, mentioned about tidying your room up. And I don't know how many stories they had of girls who did it when mum didn't have any effect. There is an issue, there's one which says standards in church dress. And how many mums have told their girls to get back into the bedroom and put something a little bit higher or lower? But this book will say it straight, very balanced. So if you would like to subscribe, I think it would be money well spent. Anybody here, Deanne's going to get one of these copies, but if there's anybody here with a teenager between 13 and 19, a girl, anybody here? Come and get one. You're a young mother. Yes, I challenge you to subscribe to them for your library. I've got... Thank you, Carol. Yes. Oops. Can we share? Oh, good. I give that to you with one hook, that you promote it, that you consider subscribing to it for your church. It's a worthwhile ministry.
Thank you, Anne. Let's
Sorry
put our
about
hands
the
together
ad.
for Anne. Excellent. Pim, Wim and Gigi. I wonder what the boys' magazine will be called. Anyway, where's my friend Shane? Shane is our conference treasurer, and Pastor Ben and I have also made him our conference health director. Because, look at this guy. He is actually 73. He looks like 43. He rides his bike every Sunday about 80 kilometres, and then sometimes during the week he will ride these night rides after work, and every morning he wakes up early and he rides his stationary cycle at home. He doesn't eat between meals. He's taken all the chocolate and sugar out of my office. He continually lectures our team about the health message and how when we eat between meals, it hammers the pancreas and all these other things. Anyway, I'd like you to just hear Shane as he talks about the finances of our conference, because it's important for us as leaders to understand how God is leading in that area as well. Thank you, Shane.
Did I sound like a fanatic? No, Eddie actually went into the extremes about me. He does, yeah. I'm always talking to him because I love him. It's indeed an amazing privilege to be here today and to be working with an amazing team of pastors. And it's so great to work with Eddie and Ben because they are so focused and they're so spirit-led. And that makes me very humble because I keep saying to work with a group of pastors, dedicated, committed, passionate pastors, is just an amazing privilege. But for all that to happen, we need what? What do we need? We need money. So that we can put money back into where it really matters, so that we can go tell, so that you spirit-led people can reach out to the people. So I'm just going to show you some facts. These are actual figures going back to 2000. And if you can just show the graph, please, Hannah, before that. Oh, it's gone. That's okay. If the graph is gone, it must be hiding somewhere. That is information actual information for 2011. We budgeted for $9.2 million, but we got $9.4 million from people. This is tithe given by the people. And that is your money that you've given so that we can put it back where it really matters. So 9.2, we got 9.4. That's about 246,000 more. How did we use that money? We actually put 65 cents of that dollar, so 6.2 million, back into the field for pastors and for running the field. So that 65 cents of the dollar that you gave is put back into the field. And we also put about 4.3 into outreach and evangelism. So altogether, that's over 70 cents or close to 70 cents of the dollar you gave is going back into ministry. That is absolutely fantastic. It's a unique, the North New Zealand Conference. That's why I'm privileged to work for the North New Zealand Conference. This is not done anywhere within the South Pacific Division. This is unique because of the regional pastor approach. And I think that is fantastic. That's where the money should go. And then into education, we put another 5.6 cents of the dollar. Then we have a policy within the church where 10% of what you give or 10 cents of what you give goes back into the North New Zealand Conference for the church work within the Union, which includes North New Zealand Conference, South, the Mission Fields, Cook Islands, French Polynesia, and what's the other one? New Caledonia. So they can reach out and for ministry in that area. And then another percentage goes to the division. Out of that, 2% goes to General Conference. So 13 cents of your dollar goes to the South Pacific Division. And then sustentation is a levy that we have to give to sustain our sustaintees, the ones who are retired and old. Then we need to sustain them. So, if you add all that together, 99 cents or almost $1 goes out into really ministry. That's fantastic. That's unbelievable. And how do we, as a conference, survive? And how do we do that? The whole dollar is going out. But we have other sources of income. So we need about 12.6 cents of the dollar beyond that dollar for us to serve as administration as well as accounting and IT services. We need to have accountants to make sure that there's accountability of the money you give us. So we put about 4 cents of the dollar into there. So how do we get that money? So can you, the next slide please? So this is where we get that other source of income. Offering and donations, people give offerings and donations. That's 155. Then we have investment, which we put money aside and get some interest so that we can make sure this thing happens. 224,000 in 2011, and then you got the administration fees. That's what when we give pastors some cars and we charge them for that, so we get a bit of money for that. We have to get something from you. We have a few houses, so we get about 88,000 on that. We got 88,000, and then we have gain on sale. That's very Mickey Mouse. Then we get a tight percentage back. If we put more than 60 cents of the dollar back into the field, the division gives back from that 13 cents we talked about. They give us 10.5% back. So at least we get something back. So we got about 130 last year. And then we rented our premises to the to the NZPUC, which is the union that was in our premises. They have walked away, so we have lost that money. So half of our building is just vacant. Then we get other sources of income, like from Bethesda profits and stuff like that. So that's where we got about $1 million. That's how we, as a conference, in the team and the conference, survives. And that is absolutely fantastic. And we want to do the same thing. Now we'll just look at another what's happened up to July this year. That's the growth chart of actual compared to budget. Can you see that slide? That's from 2006. The budget is down there. The blue bar.
So Shane, what's the white one and what's the purple one?
The white one is the actual. So can you see? We've always, except for 1 year, we've always gone over the actual. That's fantastic. Look at that. Except for 2000 and, when was it? 9. I don't know what happened there. There you go. There are. So you can see, just fantastic. And I believe, we'll come to that later on. This is fantastic, and I hope this trend continues to happen. But I'm a bit worried this year. But who knows? Next slide, please. Okay, that's the membership. We had a cleanup. You can see it was quite high earlier on, but I don't think it was very accurate. So we had a cleanup in 2008, and now we are climbing and going back up the ladder again. So I hope and pray that our goal is like 1,000 or 2,000. I want to see 15,000 members by the end of this 2013. I think we can do it. It is so possible. I love to see that. I think we have such amazing people here. We can do it. Amen to that. The next slide, please. Okay, the growth chart compared to the gain, it's a bit of a funny slide. I don't like that very much. That's, again, your tithe comparison. I'll work on that later on. Next chart. Okay, this is up to July. This is the first slide I wanted for last year, but I couldn't find it. Oh, you couldn't find it. That's just a snapshot of information up to July. But let me show the next slide. It makes it more easier to look at. Here's where the problem is. We budgeted for 9.5 million. Were we over ambitious? I don't know, Eddie, but I think, well, let's see. Budget was up to July is 5.5, but we only got 5.3. But again, ladies and gentlemen, this is what's the beauty of it is. 68 cents plus the 2 cents, that's almost 70 cents. Again, is going back into ministry within our conference. Of course, then we have the education. We still have the 10% that needs to go to the union, and then the 12.9, which is going to SPD, and we're still putting almost $1 back into ministry. And finally, Mr. President, I've got to mention this one. Excellent. As Eddie said, my passion, let's go. Well, we got to run forward here. Eddie will. Okay, this is a very important slide. In 2010, as a result of this amazing giving by the people, we had 86 congregations. In 11, we had 101. And now, we have, up to August, we have 119 groups, companies, and congregations. Isn't that fantastic? It's just, and we want to make it 150. Next slide, please. Almost done, Eddie. Okay. And as Eddie said, I have a passion for health, and I believe very strongly in this. Just a slide before that, please. Oh, the next one. That
Do you want this remote control?
No, it's okay.
Okay, just checking.
I believe in this so wholeheartedly because I believe that the holistic approach to health. We have an amazing health message, and I think the quality of our life is so important so that we can be amazingly spirit-led. Our connection, our spiritual connection is so important, that vertical thing. I think that vertical connection, if it's alive and well, the rest of those dimensions should automatically fall into place. Health should not be an undue preoccupation. Don't get me wrong, just because I ride a cycle, and I don't do it every day, Eddie. It's just I kind of Sunday, Thursday night ride, then I have 2 days in the morning because I have to spend time with my family.
Amen,
evenings.
brother.
But that is very important.
Amen,
The balance is really very important, not an undue preoccupation. So
Preach,
the spiritual,
brother,
I'm almost finished, Eddie. The next slide, please. And the health philosophy, North News Conference, I would like to really put this in your head. Health is available for everyone, for a lifetime, and it is what? Personal. So that we can be amazingly spirit-led and we can reach out. God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Shane. And you can see the importance of his ministry in our team and why we ask him not to use PowerPoint. How many of you here are treasurers? Anybody here who's a church treasurer or has been one in the past? Thank you for your ministry. It's so important. It is one of the most difficult roles in the church. It's just so...
That's why I don't do it no more. I need elder instead for my sons.
You got to, it's just so time consuming. And so thank you to Shane and his team and for those who are working with him on ensuring that we are Spirit-led stewards of what God places into our hands for us to use. My good friend Brendan, it's so good to have Brendan. He's been here for every Spirit-led, and except for last year where we got to him just a little too late and he had another appointment in Adelaide. But just so thankful that you're here, Brendan, and thank you again. Could you just share with us what you're up to right now and how Amanda is and how the boys are?
Yeah, Amanda and the boys are going really well.
Yep.
What I'm up to right now is my conference role is discipleship coordinator, which includes the healthy churches, which includes children, by the way. And so I do that at the conference, and also working on some study, which is taking some time as well.
And some of that study has influenced some of your sharing, and you've connected it with a lot of your writing and thinking and church leadership in the past. And so I've heard some comments during the course of the weekend about your workshop, but could you give us the nutshell version, just so that we can just grasp some of this new, fresh thinking that's taken place?
Well, where I live in Sydney, a whole lot of different research is saying that's one of the most consumeristic cities on our planet. And so working the areas of healthy churches, working the areas of discipleship, we're saying if we're going to address that, then our church, our schools and everything, they're watering cans, but the plant is not in the soil. We're pouring lots of water onto plants that aren't in soil. Soil is what happens in everyday life. Most of our church members, if the research we're doing is indicating the correct measurements, live with a consumeristic worldview, where they're still Christian, but we end up consuming God, we consume one another, we turn people into commodities. And so in that environment, when we're making God exist for my glory rather than I exist for his glory, we're missing what it is to be community. Consumerism destroys community. Consumerism is the opposite of community. So addressing consumerism, trying to address that worldview, trying to redress what it is to, rather than time equals money equals things equals happiness. I believe the Adventist church, especially with the context of Sabbath, where time doesn't equal money, this idea that we're living in Babylon, which is all about self. How do we thrive in that environment? And how do we be that community where Babylon has fallen? How do we be that community that shows the world what happens when a group of people does life God's way?
Give us just one example that we could just capture and get us an idea of how that looks, say, in the church.
Well, an example is if we live by the consumer grid, where time equals money equals things equals happiness, if we think the goal of life is happiness, the Bible, the goal is about glorifying God. The Bible talks about joy. We talk about happiness. Then every day I get 3,000 messages that tell me that I need things to be happy. So to get those things, I need more money. Time equals money. So whatever takes my time takes my happiness. So serving in my church, it takes my time, which threatens my happiness. So I'm not going to serve. Putting time into my marriage, it takes my time, takes my happiness. I'm not going to put time into my marriage. I'm not going to put time into my parenting. I'm not going to put time into getting to know my neighbours. In actual fact, what am I going to put my time into? I'm going to work really hard from early to night because I need a bigger house. I need more stuff. I need more bedrooms than I actually need because I'm defined by my things. That's the grid that 98% of people in Western culture are living in. The research is showing that New Zealand is not quite as consumeristic as Sydney, but you're fast heading in the same direction. In that grid, I actually miss out on life because life is about growing, serving, connecting, sharing, worshipping. Life is about all this. I don't do that because that doesn't make sense in my consumer grid. And so in actual fact, I'm going to sit in an old age home one day and I'm going to reflect on a world of desperate need that I was never serving in. I'm going to passionate prayers I never prayed, a marriage that I never invested my energy into, kids that grow up just way too quickly. Where this is what's happening. We've got people sitting in old age homes. They've done really well as far as success goes, but they've missed out on significance and they've missed out on living life. So that's what I'm putting my energy into. How do we address that? What sort of things work through that? And that's what we chatted about in the workshops.
Fantastic. God bless as you continue your study, and we need you to come back so we can just follow you in this journey, because I guess you're just in the beginning of putting together what is necessary to help us combat that in the local church, and particularly in our Adventist context. what that looks like. Any thoughts yet on that, in that direction?
Well, we've talked about some of that, and some of the people this weekend in the workshops, when you've chatted to me afterwards, have had some really good ideas. So I'm putting a lot of energy into what do we do with children. If we can get our parenting... See, this gets I'm thinking, where do I attack next? So this is complicated. But because we grow up with a consumer picture of God, we then parent in consumeristic ways. We don't give our kids concepts of with God. We give them concepts of where we're going to give them stuff to compensate. Therefore, we end up with a picture of God that's consumeristic. We consume church. We consume one another. So we're doing a whole lot with parents in this homegrown strategy, we call it, where we're doing a whole lot of parents. And how do we parent children to be media aware? How do we parent children so they get a with picture of God rather than consumer picture of God? In doing that with parents, we're hoping we can address them at the same time because they're growing up in this consumer culture. And so we're doing a whole lot of stuff with kids at the moment in how do they address that. How do they... I really like that slide, that PowerPoint slide that Shane put up. Shane, I love your PowerPoint slides. That one where he showed that the spiritual part impacts everything. In Sydney, we're not good at that. We compartmentalise it.
Yes.
And church is where I turn up, I show up, I go home. Then I go back to my consumer religion and live like with the same goals, the same desires, the same dreams as everyone else. So we're looking at what's it mean to be more integrative in our approach to spirituality.
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you very much. Just put our hands together for Pastor Brendan. You can see how vital this is and hopefully food for thought as you return back. And if you have anything else to share on this topic, make sure you share it with Pastor Brendan. He's earlier on this year shared with me some of this, and I shared it with one of my friends who is a pastor in a church in San Francisco, where they are, of course, in a place like the United States, very much immersed in the consumer culture. So thank you, Pastor Brendan. Next, I'd like to call up, please, is Pastor Bob Larson. Pastor Bob is, you may have worked out by now, the husband of Anne Larson. You're a regional pastor in this conference. That's not in the church manual or in the organizational structure of the church. So what does that mean? What do you do? What's involved with that?
Well, firstly, I didn't ask to be a regional pastor. I resisted being a regional pastor. But
it's a good way to get a job.
But I just love it, because I love local churches and working with pastors. In the region that I have, which is this sort of mid-region, I suppose, in the North Island, because we have Pastor Anton, who has the what would you call it, Manawatu, Taranaki, the part that's closest to the mainland, did you say? Down to Wellington. Then I have the central part, which is Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Gisborne. And of course we have, in Auckland, we have Pastor Paul Siopi, Pastor Nioni Okasini, and also Pastor Ed Gallagher, who works in the Northland.
Yep. Great
team. But I just love working alongside pastors. Having been in local church ministry for many years, in situations where I really didn't have a lot of contact with other pastors or even the conference leadership, this has been a chance for me to come alongside. And I think that's probably the term that I would use best to describe it, is just to come alongside the pastor and their church and to be on a journey with them in the context of healthy Adventist church. That's what, when I get up in the morning, I go, I'm glad I'm a part of a group of people who want to have healthy Adventist churches. And as I work with pastors, I want to see healthy Adventist pastors. I'm not quite up where Shane is with, with the health, but I do encourage some of them to exercise. I'm just looking for my men that I'm talking about. Yeah, so it is. It's a role of encouragement and sharing, just being available.
Thank you, Bob. Such an important role. Could I ask all the pastors here to stand? And would like to thank each one of you for your ministry in our conference, alongside Bob and Anton and Paul. Just such an important team and a great team. I'm immensely proud of the team that God has given us here in North New Zealand. But it's not about the pastors again. And if the pastors could stay standing, but if everyone else could stand alongside them, the local church leaders, let's all stand. And there are some who are thinking, oh, I'm not a leader. I don't have a title in my church. But I would like to ask you to stand as well, because you are a leader. There are people who are being influenced by you, who you are leading in some way. And so it's not the conference who is above anybody. It's not the regional pastor who is above pastors. It's not pastors who are above churches and church leaders. We're all in this together. Jesus Christ is the leader. It's His church. We're His body. And we're just called into roles for a season to do something that God wants us to do, and then we'll move on to do whatever else He asks us to do. But this is something that we join in together. Let's be seated and ask Pastor Anton if you could come forward, please. Let's put our hands together for Pastor Bob Larson. Thank you, Bob. I just realized, Pastor Bob, that I didn't ask you to share about your workshop. So we'll just talk to Anton and get you to come back and give a nutshell version of that. Pastor Anton, you are the pastor who, as a regional pastor, looks after clusters. Mm-hmm. Now, I understand clusters because peanut chocolate clusters and those kind of... But tell us about clusters, your role with clusters.
Hi, Pastor Eddie. Wherever we travel in the world, we mention about our beautiful structure in North New Zealand Conference. And the eyes open and people gasp because we have a beautiful and unique system to manage our most precious resources and to tunnel and funnel that power and resource down to the local church, because that's where our hearts are. So we have in North New Zealand Conference 8 of those chocolate clusters. We have one nestled nicely up north, where we have Pastor Frank looking after it for us. We have 4 in Auckland, we have 1 in Waikato, and then we have 2 in the beautiful land south, 1 in Manawatu and 1 right down in Wellington. The purpose of our clusters would be to do peer support and peer accountability, peer sharing, and we have pastors who make huge commitments to come to those. One of our cluster pastors travel 6 hours to come for 3 hours of peer stuff. So that's really great. And I must just say that in our cluster in Manawatu, we have 100% attendance most of the time. So funerals don't happen when we have clusters, because clusters are important.
Yes.
So we don't eat chocolates, we have water and we share and we do book reports. We share about evangelistic thoughts and thinking, mission for our regions. And then Pastor Eddie, another development has been to once a year or maybe twice have a regional day where we spend longer hours together and we get into depth with what we're doing, our core business. We live off the excitement we get from others. Many of our pastors are lonely. You get far out places like Gisborne, maybe Kataya, Kerry, those places. And cluster and regional days are there to really get some good learning under the belt, personal development, accountability going, and then share the excitement around. So,
excellent.
Yeah, it's a great model for church around the world, and we could sell that patent, I'm sure, to other parts.
Thank you, Pastor Anton, and thank you also for your ministry of prayer this weekend. Let's put our hands together for Pastor Anton. Thank you very much. So if you see your pastor, just say, "Hey, pastor, have you been to cluster lately?" And we say to the pastors, you must be at cluster meetings every month. The only reason why you can't be at cluster meetings is because you're either dead or nearly dead. So really important that. And just take notice of what Pastor Anton said there about the longer days, the days where the pastors come in for these regional cluster meetings. This is where we invite you to come along as leaders to join in. So if in between Spirit-led this year and next, there are the regional days where you can come and join in for more training and time of fellowship and prayer as well. Just let's have that nutshell, please, Pastor Bob, and then we'll move on to Pastor Paul Siope, our last one.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. The workshop that I was a part of there, we were focusing on the word belonging.
Yes.
And I was just asking the folk in the workshop, just this last one we had before, talking about what do you really like about your church? And as I was overhearing some of the comments that were coming out of those little cluster of people there just talking away, I was so encouraged of how people who are here just love their church. They feel they belong. Then the challenge was, well, how come some people don't stay in our churches? If we love our church so much, how come other people don't always feel they belong? So we looked at some of the barriers that people have in their own journey to God and how we can sometimes put up barriers in the church. There are 3 texts which we used, and I want everyone here to repeat the main points of these 3 texts that really help us to break through barriers that come up within the church, which are often to do with conflict. And so the first one is from Matthew 18, which says, go. Can everyone say go?
Go.
Okay, that's great. So there is never an excuse not to go and bring reconciliation. It's always on our shoulders. It's not on the other person's shoulders. We always have to go. And the second one was to go. Why do we go? To be a peacemaker. So let's say all that together. We go and be a peacemaker. Ready? Go and be a peacemaker. And then as we go, what is the attitude and what is the thing that really will make sure we are balanced? And it's from Ephesians chapter 4, which is speaking the truth in love. We all say that together? Speaking the truth in love. So that's in a nutshell. We go, we become a peacemaker, not a peacekeeper, and we speak the truth in love.
Thank you, Bob. Excellent. So Paul, please come forward. How many of you were at Dr. Paul's workshop? Yeah, let's talk first about the workshop and then I'll move to your role right now and what you're doing. So give us the nutshell version, please.
Well, the workshop this weekend was entitled Radical Fellowship. And it sort of sounds like an oxymoron because these 2 words, you wonder how they interrelate and how they can partner up with each other. But it was to attempt to ask the question in regards to the churches and the fellowships that we belong to. If the church was not only we try to attempt to describe the kind of fellowships we come from and how relevant they are and what they feel like to us within a church context, and then ask the same questions in regards to maybe the community, how they felt or how they would describe the kind of fellowship that we as a church provided for them. And one of the questions that we try to attempt to look at was if your church was, or my church or our church was to close, what would the community miss about it? And so we looked at that and got different responses about that. But in a nutshell, what we were saying in regards to this radical fellowship is that the fellowship we belong to is a fellowship that understands the koinonia, or the love of God, the agape love of God that spills over into sharing the lordship of Jesus Christ. It is also a fellowship that also serves in the posture of a slave. And it's also a church or a fellowship that is willing to witness not only in the life that it lives, but even to die for the cause of Christ. We also then looked at some of the roles that the Bible speaks about in regards to this fellowship that is radical. And there are about, how many were there, family? 4 or 5? One which was to be a prophet, a priest, a king, a healer, and a liberator. And those things were about Christ's mission and ministry, and that we as a church were continuing that ministry and that mission of Christ here on earth as we embody the gospel of Christ. The radical fellowship was actually to also, what made the fellowship radical was to understand that was the fact that we have a missional component. And because our fellowship has this missional component where God sends us out as a fellowship of believers, we then become this prophetic presence in culture, in community, that brings transformation to the world. So that was it in a nutshell.
What a blessing. What a blessing. Yeah. You can see how all this connects and interrelates what we've been doing here as you listen to the presentation of the workshops. And our prayer is as you go that you will know that you have a team who are with you, who are walking with you, who are praying for you and want to see that kind of a church come about. Paul, your current role, you are pastor of Calvary Community Church, and you're also the leader for church planting in the conference. Tell us a little bit about Calvary Community Church first, because you have the 3 roles. You're a regional pastor, you're pastor of Calvary Community, and you also head up church planting. So let's start with Calvary Community, something for us to be encouraged by from your church.
Sure, Calvary Community. In regards to the workshop that was provided this weekend, I asked the same questions of myself while preparing. If Calvary Community was to close today, would the community miss Calvary Community? And today I'm happy to testify to let you know that if we close as a church, our community would be poor for it. In that it is become over the last 2 years a missional, committed church to being what we shared about early on. And we've just watched God's Spirit lead, and it's been a focus on mission and discipleship and watching people come to the Lord. I reported early on that last year we baptized 119 people, but of those 119 people, I did not Bible study with any one of those 119 people, but it came about because by discipling people in the Word, they went out and they discipled other people. And the whole principle of hanging around with the lost people, the last people, the least people, and the people that are left over. When you hang out with those kinds of people, you will find that lost people know where lost people are. The last people know where other last people are, and so on and so forth. And it's just amazing to see that dominoes effect take place where God is bringing people to himself. So over the last 18 months, we've seen the church grow. It was at 65. Now we have numbers around 250, 300. We run 2 services a Sabbath. One at 11 and one at 5. There's a bit of we have a different approach. Every first and third Sabbath, we have what we call a gathered Sabbath, where we have service at 11 and 5. Every second and fourth Sabbath, we have what we call a scattered Sabbath. So in the morning, we send people out to go visit their friends and family, build community, and then invite them to church. And by being a persistent kingdom nuisance to those people, we finally are able to see people then move towards to Christ and the relationship.
So you have a 5 o'clock service on that scattered?
Yes, every scattered Sabbath, we have 5 o'clock service every Sabbath. And we just don't know, the people that are coming. We just are flabbergasted by the kinds of people and the amount of people that come. We have what we call cell groups. And what we do with cell groups is we meet every week in these cell groups. We have 37 right now. And once a quarter, all the men's cell groups come together and all the women's cell groups come together. But we've just seen when we've held these events, just the gymnasium at Asda just fill up with all of these people. We started with 12, grew to 60, and now we have about 300 men, 300 ladies who attend these, and it's just an amazing experience.
Praise God.
Praise the Lord.
Church planting. We've been talking about the next biggest small and multiplying and building, planting new churches and big churches to ensure that they have small group ministry taking place. So you've been leading that for us. Just give us an update of how that goes and what your thinking is behind that.
Yes, a couple of years ago we launched church planting in our conference from Ponsonby Church, and we entitled it, Take the City, Take the Nation. And a big statement. It seemed ambitious and maybe ambiguous in terms of how we were going to do it. But we believe that if you think big and act small, we will see the kingdom of Christ begin to expand in our conference. And so over the last couple of years, you would have seen the stats up on the screen that Shane shared in regards to what the Spirit is doing in enabling the churches to begin to grow around our conference. So one of our statements that we make to enable church planting to conceptually be realized in people's thinking and then make it easy for them to actually move into being a practitioner of it, of this practice, is we say that wherever Jesus is believed and received, the church is planted. Because oftentimes when we talk about church planting, people start thinking about organization, structure, and leaders and that kind of thing. But when you look at that statement and understand it, that wherever Jesus is believed and received, the church is planted. So as I share Jesus with Eddie, the church is planted in Eddie. And all of us have the opportunity to see the church plant right across our conference. So that's the first thing. The other thing we talk about is about that church planting is the fruit of relationally discipling people after Jesus Christ. So as people are following Jesus and his lordship, you can't help but see the church be planted. If I could just close out with this, Eddie, and think and just share that church planting is not just a new separate entity that specialists do or people of interest do, but that church planting is what we all do together. Amen. And so if you are part of an already established church, one of the signs of a healthy established church is that it becomes a parent church, a grandparent church, and a great-grandparent church. But if you're in a church that is not planting churches, then you have to question the health of your church. And the church is not the bureaucracy or the institution, but it's the person who's sitting next to you.
Exciting stuff. Thank you very much, Dr. Paul, and may God bless you. Let's put our hands together for Paul and thank him for his ministry. And just know that we're all a part of what God is doing right now, and God is calling you. And maybe you're being called to plant a church in our conference. Maybe you're the one that God's hand will be on to multiply and see more people reach for Christ. We're going to